just typing them in the Q&A. This is what it looks like. Should be pretty easy, and Scott will pick them up as quickly as he can. And I just want to, let's see, where is this page? This is our sponsors. This is our link. And okay, we have 2 more events this month. One is coming tomorrow, talking about MVC with Walt Richter. And on December 10th, we're going to do performance tuning. And the sequel with major sellers. And you're all welcome to join us for those 2 talks. And that's all I had, so let's take it with Scott. Thank you, Scott, for coming.
Great. Well, thanks a bunch for everyone for attending. I'm amazed this is my 18th session of this. That's great. Time flies when you're having fun, and it's always great to come on and have a chance to answer questions. I think we have about 60 minutes set up today. For people who come on late, I think it's also recorded, so you can also catch up and hear it later. And for people that haven't had one of these sessions before, basically it's a fairly unstructured format. You use the QA tool that's built into the live meeting to ask questions. And so you can basically ask any type of question you want on any topic. And then I basically spend kind of the next 60 minutes trying to answer as many of the questions as I can in kind of a rapid fire way. And hopefully provides a good way that we can kind of cover a lot of ground and have a good opportunity to discuss stuff. And what I generally do, just to give people a heads up, rather than go chronologically simply through the questions, I often try to bucketize a few questions so I cover a couple different things at the same time before I go on to the next bucket. So if it looks like I'm not answering your question, it doesn't mean that I'm not. It just means there might be another question similar to the previous one that I'm going to answer first so that we don't kind of bounce around quite as much. Before I jump into the questions, I think since my last talk a couple months ago, I think in general, we've, a bunch of exciting stuff is happening on the, the developer front with Visual Studio and with .NET. And we've done a number of pretty exciting announcements, I think, over the last couple months. In particular, last month, we had a big developer event that we did in New York that I spoke at, where we did a number of big things. One of which was, and probably the most significant, which was actually announcing the open source of the CLR as well as the core-based class libraries of .NET. We've previously open sourced ASP.NET and the framework with libraries. This was basically kind of completing the work on the server side, going all the way down to the garbage collector and the jitter, and basically kind of enabling the full runtime to be open source. We did it under an MIT license, provided a full patent covenant, and are in the process of hosting it all on GitHub. And it's been great to kind of see some of the energy and excitement that's come from that. Someone was just sending me a post today about how .NET is, I think, one of the top 3 or 4 trending repos now on all of GitHub. And just in the less than 4 weeks, it was actually the first week that we did it, we had more than 20 pull requests come in from people with patches or feature suggestions that have already been integrated as part of the distribution. And so that's great to see that energy. As part of last month's event, the other thing we announced was that we're actually putting together a official distribution of .NET that will run not only on Windows, but also run on Linux servers as well as Mac systems. And that, we're kind of enabling our server-side stack of .NET to really be available to run anywhere. And I think that's going to open up also a bunch of new possibilities. And the combination of having something that's fully open source, as well as something that can be run anywhere, kind of eliminates a lot of the barriers that people have said in the past around, hey, I love C#, I love .NET, but I want to have the ability to run here or there, have options, or I want to be open source, we now provide all of that with our developer platform. We had also then last month announced our new Visual Studio Community Edition, which is available for download immediately. This is a version of Visual Studio that has pretty much all of the pro functionality built into it. That's available completely for free, and it's available for free for any individual developer to do any type of work. It's available for any number of developers to do open source development or contribute to open source projects for free, and it's available for any small organization with less than 5 developers to develop completely for free as well. And we think really also opens up a lot more opportunity and hopefully brings in even more developers to take advantage of Visual Studio, take advantage of .NET. And it's been great to see some of the energy just in the last few weeks as we kind of announced that. Can people hear me okay? I'm hearing a few people that are saying they're having trouble hearing.
Yeah, it's fine, Scott.
Okay, great.
Unmuting. We're jumping on them as fast as we can.
Okay, perfect. And in addition to on the developer side, the other things we released is the preview release of ES 2015, as well as our .NET Be Next, with tons of great improvements as part of that. And then the other things that across Microsoft that I think are kind of big in my area, it's been kind of a steady release of updates on Azure. We're basically kind of releasing a major new feature on average now, I think every other day. So we're shipping a lot of stuff pretty fast, and tons of great value, whether it's our new virtual machine sizes, whether it's with the data stack, whether it's with Hadoop, whether it's with machine learning, whether it's improvements to media streaming, lots of improvements to both web and mobile development, and a lot more. I think we're seeing kind of Azure continue to kind of build out its capability and its scale, and it's been great to see kind of all the customers that are now building some really impressive applications and solutions on it. And that's exciting to see. So, in terms of questions, let me start firing away and answering them. So if you do have questions, ask it in the QA tool, and we'll be able to go ahead and be able to answer as many as I can. So we'll start with Daniel. Daniel asks, congrats on the .NET open source news. Any advice for developers and other organizations for how to adopt open source? How do you all justify this move and quell financial and legal concerns? What do you hope to see from open source.NET in the next 1 to 3 years? A couple of things. I think it's worth calling out because for people that are in organizations where open source either is not something broadly adopted or people are not entirely sure. What does it mean? A couple of important things is, we continue to have the same engineers working on .NET that we had before the announcement. So this is definitely not us throwing anything kind of over the wall for someone else to pick up. We have actually more engineers now working on things like the ASP.NET than we did 12 months ago. And so our investment in terms of full-time Microsoft engineers is increasing. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is the official distributions of .NET that Microsoft distributes. Does include full indemnification for the code that's in it. And so, companies can feel very comfortable using the official distribution and knowing that both we stand behind it from a support perspective, but also from a legal indemnification perspective. And that's something we do across all of our Microsoft products. And .NET continues to be a Microsoft product. What's changed is, we're actually developing it more openly in the community, and we are releasing source code under an open source license. But you can see, and so people can absolutely, if they want to do fork it and do something different with it. But the official Microsoft distribution will continue to come out, and that continues to have the full enterprise support as well as enterprise legal indemnification capabilities that we've always had. And so I think it's a nice, it's a nice combination where you get the benefits of full open source, but you also still get the full benefits of what people have kind of come to expect and depend on in terms of running their business and feeling confident in its future. Other questions in terms of, let's see, related to that. A few people have asked, so Brian asked, it's awesome to see that Microsoft's releasing .NET for Mac OS and Linux. Is there any kind of estimate for when this will happen? It's a good question. So basically what we did was we announced it last month, and then we immediately made available a number of the libraries on GitHub as part of it, in particular some of the higher level libraries are included. And so those are available today and immediately. The full CLR is in the process of kind of being ported and moved, and I think you'll start to see that show up kind of early next calendar year. So probably next 2 to 3 months. And so you'll see that will also start to take the higher level libraries can be used today on top of Mono, on top of Linux. So that's one of the other things that the Mono project's been working on, is taking those libraries and enabling them on top. And so so some of that stuff can actually be used on Linux today, but the full CLR you'll see it start to show up early next calendar year. Denny asked a question: any plans for Visual Studio IDE for Mac and Linux? No plans right now. But we're certainly open to lots of ideas. Our focus right now is primarily on the runtime aspect, and then we're also doing a lot of work with Visual Studio Online and the investments that we've done there, so that we support any tool. Including tools that run on other operating systems that can integrate with our backend, and so that's been the core strategy we've had. Then anyone asked the question: with the release of .NET for Mac and Linux, what's the strategy around frameworks such as Xamarin and Cordova in terms of building applications running on those platforms? So we basically support with VS 2015 in particular 3 ways to build mobile apps that are cross-platform. One is with HTML JavaScript using the Apache Cordova project, and so we have project template support for doing that. And then it allows you to build native apps for iOS, Android, and Windows using HTML and JavaScript as your client technology. We also then have partnered with Xamarin so that you can use C# and .NET to do the same. I think the announcement of the open source, if anything, just makes it even easier for Xamarin and others to take advantage of C# and the CLR to build cross-platform applications. And so, we're partnering very closely with Xamarin in terms of enabling that and providing even sort of base support inside Visual Studio to make it really easy to acquire Xamarin and to start using it. We also then last month announced support for the ability to use C++ and our C++ compilers to build cross-platform C++ libraries that you can also use across multiple platforms. And we also shipped a new Android emulator that is significantly faster than the Google emulator, and it's getting really good feedback from developers that they can also use to basically test Android apps on top of their PCs. Christian asked a question: what are your thoughts about the Xamarin platform and tools for cross-platform and Visual Studio? Are there any joint plans that I can talk to? We're big fans of Xamarin and think it's great. And so we've been very supportive of their project, and think it's a great way for developers to be able to use the language that they love, C#, to be able to build mobile applications. So we're very supportive and partner very closely with them, and are going to continue to do so even more in the future. Ed asked a question: hey, what was the name of this free development tool? How do I get it? It's called Visual Studio Community, or Visual Studio 2013 Community Edition, I think is the full name. And if you go to visualstudio.com and go to the download, you should be able to download it for free starting immediately. Vasile asked a question: what uptake do you expect from offering .NET on Mac and Linux? It's a good question. We don't entirely know what the uptake will be. I think it will be, in particular on Linux, non-trivial. And generally I would say there's a couple reasons we did it. Both because we know people do want to use it and will use it. I think also that the things that by doing the open source announcement and the cross-plat announcement, the things I'm hearing amongst even our core developer base is, two side benefits that help them even if they don't plan to use the cross-platform or the open source nature, which is, knowing that I have the option of running on multiple platforms in the future makes me much more confident to work on Windows and build .NET apps for Windows today. And, I think that's something that for a lot of enterprises that, that increasingly worry about lock-in across all their solutions, having that ability to work in multiple places, I think is something that people appreciate, and it ends up, frankly, making .NET on Windows even better and, more popular by doing so. I think the other thing that by doing the open source announcement and then also the free tooling announcement gives us is, a way to continue increasing the number of developers that do .NET. And I'd say, in particular, how do we keep bringing in kind of fresh new developers that are just graduating from school or just learning the program. And I think increasingly people want to be able to look at source code. That they want to be able to have, in many cases, an open source license and know that what they're working on has that, and they want to have free tools. And I think this gives us a way that we kind of make .NET and C# and our overall development story more attractive to even a broader developer audience, which helps increase the number of developers, brings in new perspectives, and I think overall makes the overall .NET ecosystem even healthier and hopefully more fun for everyone to be part of. Let's see. Eugene asked, how frequent will the official .NET distribution be released? It's a good question. I think, Eugene, one of the things we're trying to do is, move to a slightly smaller distribution of kind of core capabilities that we update on a regular cadence, and then move so that more of the libraries are distributed through NuGet, and that we can rev kind of at a faster pace and a little bit more agilely across the different libraries. And so we've kind of done that with ASP.NET the last 2 or 3 years, and I think seen a good adoption cadence for it. And my sense is we're going to continue to do that across the broader .NET libraries going forward. I think we'll probably still have, and the cadence that we're on right now with Visual Studio is, I think on average we're doing a major release every 12 to 18 months. And then we're basically doing these quarterly releases as we kind of unveil new functionality even to the existing product that people can optionally install. And I think that cadence we've seen some really good uptake from, and it's a way that people feel like, hey, I'm continually getting value, it's continuing improving, I don't have to wait till the next major release. At the same time, it's not every day, so I'm not having to kind of replumb things every day, and we do keep a very high compatibility bar as we do those quarterly updates. And in general, I think what we're trying to do is be as responsive as we can, so that when we get feedback on, hey, we wish we had this feature, or we wish, you supported that, we can actually respond quickly and actually, make everyone happier. Let me do a couple more in the open source one, and then I'll jump to a different topic, then we can come back. Dave asked a question, hey, there's been a lot of confusion over the .NET runtimes. Just this morning there was a long Twitter discussion about the differences and overlap between K and Core CLR, etc. Can you try and provide some perspective on the different new runtimes, what they're used for and when? It's a good question. Generally I think we're going to have, two, from a runtime, CLR runtime perspective, basically I think you're going to see us have kind of two distributions, if you will, that people will target. One is the full .NET framework distribution that we ship as part of Windows today, and that's the one that has been around forever, and where apps starting with .NET 1.0 and above still are compatible with. And that has a very broad surface area and supports a ton of stuff. One downside with that broad surface area is it is a very big API library now, and there are features that made sense in 2003 that don't make as much sense in 2014. And we also do have a compatibility bar that we need to maintain with that because there's a huge number of apps that are built towards it and it runs on Windows. One of the things we're trying to do with the core CLR distribution, which will also form the basis of our cross-platform distribution, is to basically, maintain all the goodness of that big full .NET distribution, but really focus it even more and have a surface area that we think is more tuned for what people are building today, and then also kind of optimize it for agility so that we can take it cross-platform and it's not as overwhelming a giant surface area. While at the same time being compatible and being kind of a compatible subset of the full .NET framework that we ship in, built into Windows. And developers can basically choose to target, inside Visual Studio, you can choose to target the existing .NET framework, and that will in fact be, I think, for the next version of VS, by default still, when out of the box, VS will target. And then if you want to, you can kind of target the core CLR, which includes not just the core engine, but it includes ASP.NET, EF, Web API, all of our newer libraries will be supported on top of that. And as part of that, we also support the ability where you can actually package up the runtime and ship it as part of your app so that you don't have to worry as much around compatibility where if some other runtime gets updated on the machine, does your app break? And so we think, again, this gives us more agility, gives you something sort of a slightly leaner surface area to focus on, so it's not quite as overwhelming in terms of number of APIs, but at the same time, it's the same C#, it's the same core .NET libraries that you're familiar with, and all of the modern libraries that people have come to expect. I think we're going to need to obviously continue to do more education as we get closer to that coming out, so that we can actually make sure that that's something it doesn't confuse folks. So let me jump to a few maybe Azure questions. This looks like there's a few that have popped up here. Let's see, move to the top here. A couple questions. Oops, I just resorted things. 1 second. A few people have asked about Docker support and sort of said, hey, now that you've announced, so one of the other announcements we made about 2 months ago is the partnership we're doing with the Docker community, both to support Docker even better on Azure, including, we already support it with Linux. We're going to do even deeper integration with Azure where we support things like Docker Hub, which provides a way you can browse galleries of Docker images and use them for container technology. We also then announced that we're taking Docker and we're integrating it with the next version of Windows Server so that you can use Docker-based containers not only for Linux applications but also for Windows applications going forward. And we'll basically put Docker images in the Docker Hub community, as well as also have that same integration inside Azure flow through it. And we're excited in general about container technologies and the containerization approach. I think embracing and supporting Docker is yet another example of how we've kind of changed our approach to be much more open and really focus on partnering with existing ecosystems in a richer way. So the question was, hey, are you going to build even more Visual Studio support for Docker and for containers going forward for building apps? The answer to that is yes. In fact, if you look at the developer event we did last month in New York, one of the demos we actually showed was building an ASP.NET app, deploying it to Linux in a Docker container, and then using Visual Studio on a PC to remotely debug that, with all of the runtime server technology running on top of Azure, which is kind of a nice approach. You'll be able to do the same thing with Windows Server going forward with Docker and Visual Studio, and you'll see us add even more support for Docker inside our development tools and our overall development framework as we do that. So yeah, so you'll definitely see that happening more going forward. terms of other Azure questions, Pula asked a question, can you discuss the future of HD Insight and what improvements are in store? We've done a bunch of improvements to HD Insight over the last couple months in particular. We've added, for example, HBase support. We've added Storm support, which are two popular Hadoop frameworks. We've added, we're soon to be adding the Spark support. And you're going to continue to see us add more Hadoop level frameworks built into HD Insight. And for people who don't know, HD Insight is our Hadoop as a service offering that we run on top of Azure. And expect to see even more and richer support come out in the future for that. So we're pretty excited in general about Hadoop and making sure it works great and best on Azure. Other questions. What cool things does the Azure team have in store for 2015? The Azure team is moving pretty fast right now. We've got a lot of great features coming out. We have a whole suite of new things coming out in the next sort of 10 days or so that I'm pretty excited about. In general, we're kind of on a fairly fast release cadence now, shipping and delivering a bunch of new value. Some of the big features and capabilities that I'm particularly looking forward to that'll come out over the next, later this month, that we announced earlier this fall, include our new G series of virtual machines. In this case, we kind of jokingly call the G series the Godzilla series, in that they're the biggest virtual machines hosted by any cloud vendor on the internet. They support up to 0.5 terabyte of RAM, 32 cores of CPU using the latest Intel Haswell processors, and almost 7 terabytes of local SSD. And so they're pretty much monster machines. And they're ideal for any kind of data workload, whether it's Hadoop or whether it's a relational or NoSQL database. They have twice the amount of memory of the largest AWS VM size, 4 times the amount of memory of the largest Google Cloud instance size. So much bigger, and you can not only just use the full machine, but you can also just do 16 cores or 8 cores, and there's a variety of different sizes that you can use amongst that hardware based on the exact needs that you have. We're also coming out shortly with our new Azure Premium Storage offering that we announced. This basically supports up to 32 terabytes of disks attached to each virtual machine you have, it supports up to more than 50,000 disk IOPS, or I/O instructions per second, which is, I think, the largest of any cloud vendor out there, and it supports some millisecond read latency. And I think that new hardware, which shows up very, very soon, will really open up the doors in terms of the types of workloads that you can run in Azure. And I'm particularly excited to see, as people really push this hardware hard, some of the new capabilities that people will get out of it. I'm also really excited about a lot of the work that's going on in the data space inside Azure. We've had a bunch of great services. I mentioned some of the HD Insight Hadoop improvements that have happened recently. But we've also added, for example, our new Stream Analytics service, which allows you to do real-time stream processing over events. So if you have, for example, a flow of events, it could be HTTP events, they could be IoT sensor events, they could be from anything, you can actually correlate and do analysis across that stream and do really interesting things with it. We also have a new data factory service that lets you automate the movement of data between systems in a deeper way, and a whole bunch more data services coming out. So I'm pretty excited about the roadmap of things coming out, I think it's going to be an exciting next couple weeks and months as new things come out as well. Other questions? Philip asked a question around, as did someone else somewhere in this list that I can't see right now, about cloud outages. And specifically, Daniel asked, and I think someone else did as well, about some of the issues that happen in the cloud in terms of when there is a cloud outage. And what are we doing to kind of prevent those in the future? And we unfortunately did have a bad outage. It was 2 weeks ago now, maybe 3 weeks ago, so in November. And unfortunately, outages do happen, and we feel terrible when they happen because they have big customer impact. This particular outage basically happened where typically we're always very careful where we only deploy code to one cluster at a time, and we slowly roll it out in an update so that in the event that we discover an issue, we can quickly roll it back, and we don't have a global impact because we've touched all the clusters with the change. And our engineering system basically prevents us from rolling out code fast, except in an absolute emergency, like we need to do an emergency patch. And so, and in this case, it did do the right thing on the code side, in that it did roll out the code in an incremental way. Unfortunately, there was a feature in the code that we were testing, which basically did a performance optimization, and it was turned on by a configuration flag. And we were careful in testing the feature on just one cluster, and everything works great. And then we rolled it out, and unfortunately, we made a process mistake and rolled out the configuration much faster than should have. And what made it worse was the fact that that configuration change, when it turned on that feature, unfortunately surfaced a bug that was not caught in testing in that one cluster, and ended up causing some of our storage systems to go into an infinite loop. No data was lost. There's no data corrupted in the storage system, but it basically meant that people couldn't access their storage, which in turn caused a lot of virtual machines to go down, and had a bad issue. The actual fix for storage was pushed out pretty quickly, as soon as it was identified what the problem was. Unfortunately, because so many systems depend on storage, it then took a while for every system to recover. When you have sort of millions of virtual machines, unfortunately, when you need to reboot them or power them up, you can't do it all at once, or else the surge, basically, your storage system can't handle it. And that was the reason that the outage was longer and more prolonged than we'd like. So we feel terrible about it, and the team, basically had sleeping bags and stayed 24/7 for about 3 or 4 days as we worked through all the issues in terms of verifying and sure it couldn't happen again. This issue we know for sure can't happen again, because we've already hardened the engineering system to prevent that type of configuration. That is already deployed. The thing that we're then doing, and what we always do in these types of incidents, is a full, we call root cause analysis, where we look at not just what the issue was, but we really try to probe and understand, what are the other types of issues similar to that could happen, and how do we harden the systems and work to prevent that. We're actually have already done a couple of rounds of root cause analysis and reviews, and are kind of doing a very big review in just a few days, where we'll kind of do the final assessment, and we also publish all the documents to our customers, so they can also see exactly what went wrong, and also what the remediation steps that we're taking to prevent it. And so that is something that again, we feel terrible about, and it's something we always try to learn from and prevent from happening again in the future. I'd love to say no other cloud outages will ever happen. The reality is, with any system, there is often issues. We certainly want to make sure there's never any global outage that ever happens again, and we're doing everything we can to prevent it. And there are other cloud vendors that have, unfortunately, outages as well. AWS had a similar global outage last week, and Google's had them as well. So we all need to do better, and certainly don't want to use the fact that we all have these problems as an excuse, because that's not acceptable. We need to keep pushing to do better and really design the system so that customers can fully trust us. Jim asked a question about, with the outage, will we see remote console access soon so we can diagnose issues when VMs are down? Good news, Stephen, is that feature is coming out shortly. We're going to support it with both Windows as well as Linux. And so we are looking to provide console access. And for people who don't know what console access means, that basically means if your VM is looking to boot and for whatever reason can't boot, you can actually see the raw console that you would otherwise see on your server physical hardware machine as it's booting. And so, that is a feature that we are underway with, and you'll see us roll that out, I believe, early next calendar year. Jim asked a question, hybrid. Is this what used to be called Azure Connect? What's the best way to start with technology? We have a target product that will interface with our customer's ERP solution via our middleware on premises and behind the firewall. If you send me mail, Jim, I can hook you up with a few people that can help point you at the right docs. But in general, we provide a number of kind of virtual private network capabilities inside Azure that allow you to bridge private address spaces as well as networks that are isolated behind firewalls together. And so that could be, you can do that across 2 Azure regions. You can do that between Azure and your existing on-premise network. And you can obviously do it between Azure and customer networks that you partner with as well. And we support the ability to do that with software, so you don't have to install any hardware device. And we have something we call site-to-site networking, or point-to-site networking support inside Azure that does that. We have the ability to do what's called site-to-site, where you can either take a software VPN on-premises or a hardware-based VPN like a Cisco or Juniper router and connect it to Azure and also do that private tunneling. And then we also support something called ExpressRoute. And with ExpressRoute, what you can do is you can actually buy private fiber, network fiber from, say, a telco carrier like AT&T or Verizon, and guarantee that, basically have a dedicated fiber channel between us and your network, and that gives guaranteed network quality of service in addition to kind of obviously even more security and isolation. So all those things are released today. You can basically take advantage of that now. Jacob asked a question, Azure VPN. When you set up a VPN, is there any chance from another Azure subscription to access your VPN? How secure is it? It is very, very secure. I mean, so we basically do full isolation and ensure that no one can access it. What you can do if you want even additional levels of security is we see some customers that set up a firewall solution as well, like a Barracuda device, either in software running in Azure, or you can also do it on your on-premises network. And so if you want full auditing and even richer access control, you can do that, and then you can use our virtual private network connectivity as kind of the physical or the logical network channel, and then you can provide those types of software firewalls on top of that to provide even more auditing and isolation support. And we typically see for large enterprises, for any VPN solution that they have, not just with the cloud, they typically have those types of software firewalls in place, and they're designed to all work with Azure as well. Tim asked a question, any Azure servers planned for Australia? The good news, Tim, is we now have 2 Azure regions in Australia, one in Sydney and one in Melbourne, that we actually opened up in the end of October. And so those are open for business today in general availability form, and they have many, many servers in each of them. And so, yeah, you can take advantage of pretty much the entire Azure feature set now inside both of those regions, and do any types of solutions you want. Let me see if there's any more cloud ones before we jump to another topic. Duncan asked a question, if we have application clients in the EU, are we able to host our application database in any region of Azure? Do we need to do anything extra to conform to the EU requirements? You don't need to do anything extra. Azure itself honors the EU model clauses, and and a bunch of EU regulations. And we're kind of unique as a cloud vendor in terms of the level of compliance and support that we have. Your question was, can a customer in Europe access my app if it's in the U.S.? The answer is absolutely. In a general sense, you certainly can. Are there any EU-specific requirements to your application? In general, there's no EU-specific requirements in general, but depending on what industry or what consumer target you're going after, there might be specific requirements that your customer might have. But in the same way that a customer in the UK can access Google, even though the server might be running outside the EU, you can do the same with your application. Again, if you're targeting healthcare or you're targeting public sector inside Europe, they probably have additional requirements, in which case you might want to make sure you host that application inside an Azure EU region so that you don't have it. The only other thing to keep in mind is, that I always tell people about the cloud is, one of the true rules of software is you can never go faster than the speed of light on the network. And so the farther away your code or your application is from your customer, there will be latency additions. And so in general, I think it's roughly, one way to think about it is for every 100 miles of cable, add about 1 millisecond of latency delay. And so if someone's 500 miles apart, that's about 5 milliseconds of additional latency just as things travel down the network. And so, if you're in Europe and you're accessing a site in the U.S., there is probably a couple thousand miles of cabling that you're doing, and so you will see some additional latency. And that's why, with Azure, we have 19 regions open around the world so that you can actually host your applications as close as possible to your customers, and you can choose to basically put them anywhere. Martin asked the question, how is Azure Mobile Services different from Azure existing SignalR, Azure Storage, Web API? Good question, Martin. So the good news is Azure Mobile Services hosts Web API. So if you're building an Azure Mobile Service in .NET, you're actually programming to ASP.NET Web API, and you can use SignalR with it. What Mobile Services basically gives you is a compute container that can host your code and provides an additional set of services that plug in as like filters and modules into ASP.NET Web API that do provide things like additional authentication capabilities, monitoring, logging, etc. And so you can think of it pretty much as the same programming model that you know today with Web API and SignalR, but with some additional hooks that you can take advantage of to build solutions. In addition to mobile services on Azure, then, we also provide our notification hub service, which lets you do broadcast push notifications to mobile clients. We also have just launched in GA a new API management service that's pretty popular and growing like crazy. It allows you to basically take any API you have already deployed in the world, and you can effectively proxy to it, and you can stand up a new API that you expose to customers that goes through our gateway before it hits your API, and we provide things like analytics. You can turn on additional security capabilities. It supports things like rate limiting. So if you have an API and you want to let anyone use it, but you only want to give, say, 10,000 free calls a month for free and then require people to pay for it, you could basically implement that using our API management scheme as a way to monetize or prevent abuse of top of your APIs and so forth. So a lot of capabilities are provided with that, and you can use those together with mobile services, or you can also use them standalone with anything else. Okay, let me go through. William asked a question, what would it take to get the Axum programming language, actor-based language, open source? I like the .NET platform. It's a great platform, fun to use. I'd love to see an actor-based language come to life on the platform. Good question, William. If you send me mail, I'm not as familiar with the Axum programming language specifically, but I'm happy to connect you with folks in the CLR, and be happy to follow up whoever owns that to see if they could do a .NET port. In general, I think you will see a bunch of investments happening, both within the community and within Microsoft, around actor-based programming frameworks. And so we've talked about some of the stuff that we've done internally in the past with things like Orleans, and you'll see us talk more about actor-based programming frameworks in the future. And for people that know, actor-based models provide a pretty nice way that you can actually handle events at a fairly wide-scale level. And again, we'll talk more about that in the future, but there's some cool stuff coming there. Let's see other questions. A few Windows client ones. Richard asked the question: what impact will Windows 10 have on VS tools and libraries? Well, Windows 10 will support all existing VS tools and libraries. First, let me make sure that's clear. So there shouldn't be any compatibility impact with what you already have written. And you can continue to build new applications that runs seamlessly on top of it. One of the things we are doing with the next Windows release that I think is a big improvement is unifying things like our stores that we had previously across, say, Windows Phone and Windows Desktop into one, so that we have one store, one monetization mechanism. And we basically introduced this concept we call universal apps, which allow you to basically build an app once and run it simultaneously, basically run with the same code base and the same project template even on both. For instance, you can run it not only fully like you can with Windows 8.1, but you can also run in a windowed mode where it looks like it's just an app on the Windows desktop as well. And we think that that's going to open up a lot more opportunities for developers because they can now build apps that run everywhere. And the monetization, having a single store, also hopefully enables developers to build apps and actually monetize them even better. I think hopefully will be a great story. So ask your what's the future of WinForms development? We continue to support Windows Forms development. We continue to make some improvements in them, and they'll continue to work on Windows 10 just fine. Chris, one asked Windows source checkbox now. You're 100% sure. Should be back and finish it. We are in general unifying kind of all of our Windows infrastructure, and Windows Phone, Windows Desktop, and Xbox have all historically used Windows in the past, but sort of separate forks of Windows and separate branches. And one of the big goals we have going forward is effectively to have one branch, one distribution, one Windows, and be able to leverage it much more across all those different form factors. In general, there's a bunch of improvements that we get from that. As an example, Xbox, because of concerns around console privacy or piracy, has a bunch of really good security hardening features that were introduced to kind of deter even the most aggressive hackers from figuring out how to clone games and steal IP from game companies. We're going to take some of those same security learnings and put them into the core Windows, so that enterprise customers can take advantage of that as well and have an even more secure Windows as well. So there's a bunch of sharing back and forth as we go across these scenarios that I think will make everyone's lives a lot better. And it also means that we can kind of move a lot faster and innovate a lot faster. Let's see. I talked a little about this. And so I mentioned, Will asked a question about store integration. And some of the improvements there. Shaggy asked a question, WinRT support for serial ports. What's the plan for serial port support? I unfortunately don't know the exact answer for serial ports, but if you shoot me mail, I can find out for sure and connect you up with someone. Andre asked a question, any plans to bring the blob storage functionality of Azure to Windows Server for on-premises use? I believe that is something we're looking at, Andre, for the next version of Windows Server. I definitely agree would be very welcome to have. Let's see, other cloud ones. Bill asked the question, a lot of authenticate, there's lots of different ways to authenticate. We have Microsoft accounts or Microsoft IDs, and we also have kind of organizational IDs often in terms of logging into Microsoft services. And for people that have built many accounts, how do you actually coordinate what logs in where? This is something I think that is a pain point today. I'm in this category as well, and then I have multiple accounts, and switching between them easily has been hard. One of the things we did recently is actually bring the Microsoft account team into my organization. We did this about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and we've kind of unified our Active Directory team that does org ID, with our Microsoft account team as well. And so a lot of the kind of account switching and account integration capabilities, those are things that we are planning on improving significantly over the next year, and we'll hopefully make a lot of those scenarios a lot better. If you get stuck with something, feel free to send me an email, and I can put you in touch with the team to help in the meantime. Brian asked a question: does Microsoft plan any alternatives to IIS, or do such alternatives already exist? We don't have any plans to build a new web server, Brian. We think IIS provided a bunch of great features and support. One of the things we have done, though, is, because we hear this from some customers that say, look, I want to have a core HTTP processing engine that's not a web server. I don't need a full web server. I want to basically be able to run my own microserver, my micro web server that's specific to my scenario, and possibly use it more for HTTP API communication as opposed to kind of a traditional web server HTML-based approach. And one of the things that we have done with the latest version of ASP.NET is added support so that you can actually host it or self-host it inside any process that you want. And it provides all the capabilities now and supports the OWIN-based middleware so that you can plug in and integrate our core web API as well as MVC processing stack and use it in a variety of different scenarios. And so we are seeing some customers take advantage of that, and to have kind of even more fine-grained levels of support for how they actually host and run HTTP inside their solutions. Keith asked a question: Visual Studio, Scrum, Sprint Planning, any future plans to add a calendaring feature in VS? Our team tends to be more data-oriented versus just a stack rank. It's a good question, Keith. If you shoot me a mail, I can put you in touch with Brian Harry's team that helps run Visual Studio Online and our TFS Online system. I don't know exactly where that stands, ironically, on the Scrum board, but if you shoot me a mail, I can find out for sure. And in general, the team's operating at a fairly agile pace, and they kind of do updates every 2 to 3 weeks. And there's a bunch of improvements that I know are both coming out and continue to come out over the next couple months. I'll ask the question: with the widespread adoption of Git, is MS phasing out TFS as a source control system and moving to TFS as an ALM tool that just uses Git? No, we're not phasing out TFS at all. I mean, we certainly see a lot of customers when we use TFS internally as a central source control system, and we're definitely not phasing it out at all. TFS is multiple things. It is both a source control system as well as a whole ALM solution that does build, work item, project tracking, etc. And so it's important to mention that our TFS, both our VS Online service, but also the next the version of TFS that runs on premises, will support Git as a source control option that you can also seamlessly integrate into our full ALM stack for all the other things that TFS provides beyond source control. And so that is something that we know some people like distributed source control and prefer that. Some people don't. We want to make sure we have options for both that make both people feel very happy. Andre asked a question about basic load testing with Visual Studio and what the plans are there. I don't know the exact plans, but I do know that we are looking at load testing. We are looking at things like load testing support also within Visual Studio Online. I don't unfortunately know the exact plans in terms of what features are available where, but I do know that you should in the next couple months. Will asked the question: do I still write code that goes into production? let's see, do I? A tiny bit. Not as much the last 9 months. I kind of took on a bigger job about 9 months ago, and so I'm not as much. I do still do kind of the prototypes. I do give a lot of feedback that makes it into production quite regularly. And then probably my closest production feedback has been, or code contribution has been to our website, where occasionally it's just easier for me to code it up or write it up as opposed to describe what I'm looking for. And so I have actually made some contributions to that recently. And I do still very much like to code and stay very hands-on.
Scott, we have 5 more minutes, so just maybe we want to take a few more questions and wrap it up.
Sure, I'll take maybe two or three more questions, then I'll maybe wrap it up. Pete asked a question: How have you spent? Do you spend much time in your open plan office? I saw the picture on Twitter. I'd love to work there. We have a kind of a new number of our buildings are going through some pretty significant remodeling, and we've actually adopted a much more open floor plan where instead of offices, we actually have open space. And it's actually going great. I am in one of them right now. Basically what we do is we have kind of an open space. So it's not so much cubicles, it's more we have desks that are close together. And then we make sure and we try to have like 16 people or so in a room. And then we have kind of each feature crew or feature room has typically 3 private conference rooms attached to it. So when people do need privacy or they want to do a meeting, they can very quickly pull everyone together and do it. We're finding it's actually working really great, and it's been really popular with the team. And it's kind of allowing us to collaborate and work even better. So I'm a big fan of it. And I live in open space as well. I figured it would be significantly unfair if I made everyone else do it, but then I kept an office. So I do it as well, and love it. There's a good energy vibe, I think, in open space that I like. Other ones. Bill Walter asked the question: Azure does a good job allowing you to pay for licenses as you use them by bundling Windows licenses and SQL licenses into the per minute cost of virtual machines. Why not go further and include SCALs, or whatever they are called, for remote desktop and the IS per minute charges as well? Good question, Bill. You'll see some announcements pretty soon around our new remote app service that does allow you to host Windows client apps inside Azure and basically use them for remote desktop scenarios. And you'll see some new pricing announced for that in the not too distant future that I think you'll like, and we think will work really well for customers. So let's see, how many other ones here? So allow me to do one last question, which is looking at the adoption of cloud companies. What is the different sizes of companies, of people adopting? Is it small, medium enterprises that are adopting the fastest? Is it big enterprises? What does the overall market trying to look like? In general, I'd say we're seeing some pretty great adoption of cloud across all sizes of organizations for lots of different things. And I would say even just in the last 6 months, as I talk to CIOs and across large enterprises in particular, I'm seeing a very big, significant shift where the conversation a year ago was, hey, we're thinking about cloud, but we're not sure to, we're betting everything on the cloud, which is kind of a fairly radical shift in just 12 months' time. And so I do think you're going to see more and more solutions be cloud-based going forward. And I think 2015, calendar year 2015, is really going to be a key year where you'll see that shift really start to accelerate even more. And frankly, that's partly why we've been talking about cloud so much, and why I've been working with cloud predominantly the last 2.5 or 3 years, is we kind of saw that ship coming, and we want to make sure we're in great position and have a great set of offerings that are going to make all of you successful as you look to take advantage of building cloud-based solutions. And so, I feel generally pretty good in terms of where we're at. There's a lot more features and a lot more updates that we have coming out shortly. But I think for Microsoft developers, Microsoft customers, also our ecosystem as a whole, I think with Azure and with Visual Studio and with .NET and with Office 365 and Dynamics, we've got a really powerful set of offerings that I think can help make all of you even more successful, which in turn helps make us more successful. So, it's definitely something that we're committed towards and working hard to make sure happens. So unfortunately, I think we're out of time. I want to say again, thank you for everyone that joined on this call. I love the questions. Keep the feedback coming. It's a great way that I can also learn in terms of what's top of mind for folks. And we'll keep doing these every 2 months or 3 months or so. And I guess this is the 18th, and so I'm excited to do the 19th presentation, hopefully in the not too distant future. And so if I didn't answer your question this time, hopefully I can answer it next time. And looking forward to talking, and I hope everyone has a great holiday.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for joining us. We have another event tomorrow and one more on the 10th, and the recording of this one will be available just as all other recordings are on the website.